Good afternoon. Welcome to the City of Northfield Council Budget Workshop meeting for February 25th, 2021. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, in the Press of Atlantic City on January 30th, 2021. Due to social distancing requirements related to COVID-19, there are limited seats for in-person attendance by members of the public this afternoon. For this reason, this meeting is also being presented simultaneously as a remote public meeting, live streamed using Zoom conferencing service and in accordance with the governor's executive orders and the Open Public Meetings Act. Zoom meeting participants can dial in by telephone and listen to the proceedings, or they can access this meeting using a web browser and be able to view and listen. Instructions on how members of the public could reserve one of the limited seats, as well as how they can access Zoom, have been made available on the municipal website and were published in the Press of Atlantic City. The full text of the public meeting notice has been posted at the entrance of the municipal building and includes Zoom instructions, information on where to find the meeting agenda and relative documents, as well as instructions on how members of the public could submit comments in advance of today's meeting. For those participating via Zoom, all participants will be muted upon entry to the meeting. Web browser participants will not be able to share their screens or see the camera view of anyone other than the host, which is the City of Northfield. Zoom participants wishing to exercise their right to participate during the public comment portion of the meeting should wait until the specific announcement is made to open to the public to comment period. At this time, one by one, any telephone users will be asked to identify themselves and will be unmuted to permit commentary. Sorry, this is long. For web browser participants, comments or questions may be submitted via the chat function, which will not be acknowledged outside of the designated public comment portion of the meeting. Chat users must also provide his or her name and address for the record in order to be heard. Any written comments submitted in advance will be read aloud and addressed during the public comment portion of the meeting. For the record, I did not have any comments submitted in advance. May I have a flag salute led by Mayor Chow, please?
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we have two main topics
I
tonight.
have to call roll first.
My apologies.
Roll call, Mr. Deweese,
Here.
Mrs. Madden,
Here.
Mr. Notaro,
Here.
Mr. Perry,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Utz,
Here.
Mr. Palestina,
Here.
Mayor Chow,
Present.
and we also have approval of the minutes, so we'll need to assign
Okay.
first and second.
Councilman Deweese, could you do approval of the minutes? And Councilman Nuss, could you second that?
I make motion to approve the minutes of February 11th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries for approval of the minutes of February 11th, 2021. Now you're up, Mr. President.
Thank you. As I was saying, so let's get started. We're got a full house. I think the two main topics tonight were the that are open. The fire department would like to present, and the police department would like to present. I guess we could start with the fire department. If you
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Shankus, I'm an assistant chief of the fire department. The topic we want to present on is the need to replace the aerial apparatus for the city of Northfield. To give you a little background, sometimes we use different terms in the fire department than the folks, outside the fire service. So what I'm talking about is a ladder truck. Okay. The current aerial apparatus, the ladder truck, in service for the city of Northfield, was originally, the latter section of it was originally purchased in 1973. When most of us in this room were much smaller than we are now, right? That was then in an effort to save the money, save the city some money. It was then repurposed and remounted on a new chassis and engine in 1999. So overall, that truck right now is getting quite old in age. It's the aerial section of it is really, past its use and usefulness for the city of Northfield. And part of that is because in the nearly 50 years since it was purchased, the city of Northfield has grown both in size as well as the type and style and requirements of the structures in the town. Certainly, the largest active development right now is a easy example to point to Crescent Hill. But there are many other examples in the town that have been added to the town since the original purchase of that aerial apparatus. What also has compounded our need to replace that is that when the aerial apparatus was remounted onto its current engine, 1999, that piece of equipment now has really reached
Can I pause you for
beyond-
1 second? People can't hear you. Can I give you a wireless microphone?
Sure. All right. All right. Sounds like it might be better. Is that working better? And I'll try to talk a
Much
little
better,
louder.
yes, thank you.
I'll try to talk a little louder as well. So that now 20-year plus engine it has really in the past 2 years really shown its unreliability. Last year, it was out of service more than it was in service. Now, when we think about the fact that that is a frontline emergency piece of equipment for the town, that should concern anybody. So the need to replace it really is, beyond just the fact that it is old, no matter how you want to rank it. The fact that it is now unreliable as an emergency piece of equipment really dictates the fact that we need to replace this. Could we avoid having an aerial apparatus in a town? Could we just say, hey, there's neighboring towns, they have them, why can't we just call them? That's, of course, a tempting option, but it is one that would have broader impacts than you may at first blush think about. There is something called the ISO, insurance ratings. It affects what all of us as homeowners pay on our homeowners insurance. And as part of that ISO rating is a analysis of the need for an aerial apparatus. Northfield ranks as needing that apparatus in a number of ways. Because of both buildings, there's a formula of 5 or more buildings of 32 feet in height or higher. There's also another, formula for 5 or more buildings with a fire load of more than 3,500 GPM per minute.
I could go through the list in the town of how many buildings fall into that criteria, but trust me, we are well within that criteria. So that's one reason. The other thing, of course, is if we are looking to say, hey, we can call a neighboring town to bring in this piece of apparatus, is the delay in response. And that is, as assistant chief in the department, my primary focus, and one that certainly I can emphasize to you is a matter of great concern. It's why I'm so concerned with the fact that we have now a current piece of apparatus that is frankly unreliable, is that I have to constantly think about what the next option is going to be and what that's going to present in an emergency situation. So as much as it is, of course, in any town, almost universally the most expensive single piece of equipment purchased by the town, that air apparatus is absolutely necessary in the city of Northfield. And I have the perhaps unenviable task of approaching you to say that it's time to replace it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I can give you some more information on it. Yes.
Well, my first question is maybe for Frank. When Pleasantville was built,
You'll need to speak. Yeah, there we go.
was consideration for a ladder truck because yours is too short. The one you have now is too short, correct? Was a ladder truck considered when the approval of Pleasantville was going on?
Under the voters' remedy lawsuit, it was, but that was not something they took into consideration. It does have internal firefighting sprinklers and standpipes. Usually it would be something that might be a conditional on approval, but that was not, something that in the realm of the lawsuit was not addressed. Well, they didn't, they didn't consider.
So with standpipes though, they hook right into the hose from the grass, correct?
So that building, that complex, right, there's multiple buildings in that complex. So that building, each of those buildings in that complex are equipped with a residential sprinkler system. There is a fire department connection on each of those buildings. The purpose of the fire department connection is to boost the water pressure should that sprinkler system be engaged and require additional pressure. Sure. So, but just so you understand, with that, that building is sprinklered. Each of those buildings are sprinklered on the occupied floors. A large portion of those buildings are a roof truss system, an attic system that is not sprinklered.
Okay. And I have a quick question. Who covers Northfield if a ladder truck is needed? Do you have response times for the outlying areas that have covered? And also, how often in the past 2 years has a ladder truck been needed in Northfield? Do you have those numbers?
I do not have those specific numbers for you. That's something we could, of course, gather for you.
Yeah.
Let me just address a couple topics on that. So there are, of course, neighboring towns that have ladder trucks. But Pleasantville would be our first call. Second to that would be Cardiff and Linwood as well. Okay. There's a certain formula that we use as to who we call first for different tasks.
Does Linwood have a big ladder truck?
They do.
They do.
They do. And the other thing I should mention is that I mentioned the ISO ratings and those requirements. So in order for, if the town was to try to comply with the ISO requirements by depending upon a neighboring town, a couple factors have to be put in place. One, it has to be within a certain distance. Their station must be within a certain distance of our town. And the second criteria is that they would have to be designated as automatic response on any structure call. So that doesn't mean, that's different than a mutual aid. We have mutual aid agreements with all the towns I mentioned. That's different than auto response.
But if we didn't have a ladder truck, then one would have to be part of the response.
We can request that as part of our mutual aid agreement. But just so you understand the difference between our ability to request that as part of our mutual aid agreement does not satisfy the ISO requirements of maintaining one in the town.
Is that a rating, do you know, the ISO requirements for the insurance? Is that hopefully with our GIF?
No,
It's
it's tied into your many insurance, but most common for most of us folks, right? Your homeowner's policy can also be tied into commercial policies as well. And it's set on a formula. We were able to increase our ISO rating at the last rating period, which was approximately 5 years ago. We went from a classification of 5 to a classification of 4, which, most folks might not have noticed or even realized, but that would result very often in a reduction of your insurance rate, or at least, right, you don't even notice it, right? But maybe you didn't notice it because it didn't go up as much, right? And, but so we are currently undergoing a new ISO evaluation. It happens about every 5 years. So they are actually actively looking at those calculations. Sure.
What's the size of Linwood's ladder truck?
I believe it's a 105 foot.
It's 105, and we would be looking to buy 100 foot or 105 foot?
Yeah,
Give or take.
different manufacturers, I guess, to put a little edge, but they're generally between a 75 foot and 100 foot. We'd be looking for somewhere between that range. Frankly, most likely into the 100 foot range, although we are still on that, looking at the difference in that. We've actually brought in some other town equipment to look at some of our larger buildings, see how their 75 foot aerial would fit in that scenario. The thing with ladder trucks and what is it, 100 foot, is a 75 foot, it's not just the height of the tallest building, but it is also the reach. Okay, because we have to be concerned with setbacks. To give you an example, the Northfield Community School. If you look at that building and you think about it, you think about those setbacks. We can't pull up a 80,000 pound piece of equipment onto a lawn. Certainly not in an emergency situation, or any situation. So in order to have a aerial device reach the roof, if there is a large setback, then that affects the usefulness. In other words,
Sure.
You can reach a lot further with 100 foot than 75.
Exactly. What the cost of something like this? I mean, bare bones. I mean, what would be the what?
You're looking likely in the range for a 100 foot quint, as we call it, which now a quint is, there are just pure ladder trucks. That's just a truck with a ladder on it. Okay, and some other stuff, but and then there's a quint would also have a fire pump, a water tank. It would carry supply hose, and also there's a requirement for certain lengths of ground ladders.
And that's what we have now.
That's what we have
With a
now,
smaller
and that's
ladder.
what we would be looking to replace it with, because it allows a lot more versatility.
Okay.
So a 100 foot quint, you're looking somewhere in the range of 950,000 to about 1.2 million.
And then if we looked into used, is there pros and cons to do?
Absolutely,
This is
and
just going to be questions that people
sure,
have. Of
no,
course,
and that's a good question. It's that's of course a tempting option, right? Now, in the used market, what you'll find is that most ladder trucks that are entering into the used market generally are going to be around the 20-year mark. You might find something slightly less, but rarely. You might find something more as well. And there's a common sense reason for that. Northfield's not different than any other municipality. And making such a large purchase, you're usually looking to get a lot of life out of that. You know, you're certainly going to take all the depreciation on that and pass it on to the next guy in, you know, like a 3-year lease. So there is certainly a used market there. 20 years. One of the things that I have to be concerned, and the fire officer has to be concerned, is not just the safety and our ability to respond in an emergency, you know, to the town, but also the safety to the firefighters that are responding on that apparatus. So fire equipment and much of the fire service is governed by something called NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency. They're the ones that set the kind of the industry standards. So a 20-year-old fire aerial device, it's 3 NFPA cycles from today. What would have to happen if you were to purchase that 20-year-old, in order to bring it up to current cycles, you have to fully refurbish it. And a lot of this stuff has been focused as far as those guidelines have been changed on firefighter safety. I could go through all the different criteria they have, but trust me, think of a car 20 years ago versus a car today and the safety features that are in that. It's significant. The technology has changed significantly. So if you were to look at that, the other thing you consider is this. The city of Northfield, we have generally operated on a replacement structure every 7 years. So every 7 years for the 4 fire engines, to just keep it simple as far as the terminology goes, okay? The city has scheduled replacement, or at least done that in the past. That doesn't mean we're buying all new fire trucks every 7 years, of course not. But what it means is that there's a cycle. So if you have 4 trucks and you're replacing one every 7 years, then we're holding on to our equipment for about 28 years. So if you buy that 20-year-old used aerial device, let's say we get what we get out of the other equipment, 8 years out of it. So then in the same time period that you would be, getting the life of a purchase of a new aerial device, you'd be looking at 3.5 times, right? Going back to that well of finding a used aerial device 3.5 times. There's folks I know sitting here who certainly have, much stronger calculators than I have. But if you do the math on that, you may not see the return that you're looking for.
This vehicle, when is this vehicle up for, that we're going to replace, up for replacement? In other words, how soon are we doing this, if perhaps we did this?
Right. So the process would take about 9 months to a year from the time that we sat down and started drafting solid bid specifications to when that truck would be delivered. So, you're basically looking at a year from today if you were to give us the authorization to move forward on that process. So that would be, how soon it can be done.
Right.
I'm hoping that we follow through with that because of the reasons I've identified, and the critical need for the city to have that piece of apparatus.
The question I had was, all right, so when would we likely have to replace this vehicle in the future?
So
I get what you're saying with the other, and that's good information to have, but
right.
If we replace it in a year, is that when we theoretically have to replace it anyway? Or is it 5 years, 10 years out?
No, the city actually hired a consultant 2 years ago, in actually 3 years, I guess, 2017. That consultant generated a lengthy report to the city and actually recommended that aerial device would have been replaced last year. So we're past what the consultant is saying. I gave you the timeline as far as the history of the aerial device.
Well, that's 50 years old.
It's 50 years.
So what about the truck itself? Is it due in 5 years, 10 years?
If you follow that, that formula of every 7 years, right, and it was purchased in 1999, then we would have been looking to replace that in 2027, I guess.
2027.
Okay. unfortunately, that goal of that every, 7 years, so to get a 28-year life out of each of these apparatus, that's the ideal, right? We never know exactly what we're going to get. And because of the repair history and mechanical failures on that truck, I'm not talking about the aerial device that has its own issues, but on that truck itself in the past 2 years, it's become unreliable
Is this the most unreliable vehicle in the fleet?
by far.
And could you get me a list of the repairs, like a spreadsheet of what we've been putting into this vehicle over the,
We can do that.
since this has been an issue?
Right, we can do that. And so following that, the last time the city purchased a fire truck was in 2014. The time before that was 2007. So if you add that math up,
Yeah.
we're where we would have been, right? Now, if we didn't have all these challenges with the aerial device, then the next truck in line would have been our engine 6.7, which is a 1989 engine.
And that vehicle runs well.
That vehicle runs very well. So, it's one that the officers have looked at and said, we are comfortable extending the age of that vehicle because it's proven to us that it has that ability so far, right? And otherwise, focusing on the need for the aerial device, given the mechanical deficiencies as well as the height deficiencies that we now have.
By keeping that vehicle longer, would that have a negative effect to this insurance rating or?
It wouldn't.
Okay.
It wouldn't. That's one thing that they do not focus on the age of the vehicle. They focus on its capabilities.
Gotcha.
Speak
Sure.
loudly, please, Barbara. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, you're reminding me. You're looking to put this in the capital budget for, is it next year or this year?
Not this year.
Well,
What are you anticipating this to go into the capital budget, what year?
so that's up to you folks, of course, as to what year it would go in. What I could say is that if you told us to move forward with this project,
So you're looking at next,
we'd be looking at writing the check. The city would be looking at writing the check 12 months from now at the earliest.
so you're looking for the next year's capital budget. Because as you see, it takes almost a year of preparation. So what you're looking for now is approval to start repairing, send out bids and look into it.
Right. There's a whole, we'd have to develop the bid specifications before then we could send out bids. Okay. Now, of course, all that's affected. I mean, would it give us more ability and freedom that if you put it in this year's capital budget? Absolutely. But I understand realities, right? So, yes, next year.
That's well, yeah, I have a better idea now, thank you.
Mhm.
But, I'm looking for some numbers, I don't know about that.
Dawn, it would say, let's just say, for instance, we put this into capital, and I mean, what would this do to the debt service? I mean, how would this roll in? What would it do to the debt services? I mean, I know that's a kind of
Well, yeah, we're,
a question, not now, of course, but in the future. I mean, how would this affect what our payments are?
We typically do a 5-year plan,
Mhm.
right? And 2021 is the end of our 5-year plan. And you made decisions at the last meeting to kind of finish that all up, and the fire truck was not in there. Right. So realistically, this would have to be in the 2022 bond ordinance. To do anything, and that would start our next 5-year cycle, and then we would group another $4 million in projects together. Tom and I discussed this a little earlier today. Even if we did away with all the projects that we had planned to do for 2021 and try and put the fire truck in, there's not enough money.
Right.
There's not enough authorization there. $1.2 million is hard to get in to a $4 million, a $4.5 million plan at the end of the cycle.
Right, but like for 2022.
It's a
that's
clean
almost
slate.
a quarter.
That's a
That's
clean slate.
quarter of that bond,
Right.
correct?
I mean, it's good that we're talking about it now, but, and,
Yeah.
Maybe something will come up during the course that it won't be so much, or, we'll look into it and see where we're at.
What was the height again on the current?
50 feet.
50.
50?
Yeah. And that, the current one is a elevated master stream. It's an aerial boom that has on it a escape ladder. The town as it existed in 1973, of course, was quite different. So the rescue capabilities of that 50 feet beyond just the height restrictions,
Right.
the actual ability to use that in a rescue operation versus a modern, aerial device is quite different.
If we, you say it takes about a year for research and getting bids and all of this. If we considered it for the 2022 capital budget, which is a big chunk of that, you're under no obligation. Is this just research to find out which is, you can get the best deal or what you're looking for? This research wouldn't apply, would be no obligation to, that would have to go.
No, and until it goes to bid, right? I mean, that's, so,
And then from the time it goes to bid, what's the time frame on that? In other words, if you go to bid in 2022, after, if it was approved in that budget, it could go to bid then, and then you would be.
and then, if 6 to 9 months for construction.
All right, well, that sounds reasonable. Does that sound reasonable for your department? Something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay. One thought. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so you're not looking for that in this capital campaign, you're just letting us know ahead of time, because this came after our second meeting, and, of course, we were shocked, I have to say. We thought we had things pretty much squared away. And for point of reference, Dave, I saw an 85-foot quint for sale today on the internet, 2005, for a little under 400,000. And it had 83,000 miles on it. I don't know how you get 83,000 miles on a fire truck. But,
Yeah, right.
I can do a lot of lives.
And it's,
But so about 400,000, and it's 15 years old.
Yeah.
Um,
doesn't seem like a good investment at that number. Yeah.
So, but it relieves me to know that really you guys are looking, and why is there a $250,000 spread between your high and your low number? I mean, you guys have known about this for a while and you haven't spec'd it out at this point?
So fire trucks are custom, new fire apparatus are generally custom built pieces of equipment. So it is a difficult thing without going to the manufacturers with a set specs to nail them down on, okay, here's the exact price. Which is why also just the process of developing that takes, those bid specs are significant. I mean, the specs will be about that thick, once they're developed. We then take those specs and solicit, through the city process, of course, bids as to what the price would be to build a piece of equipment. So why that range is in there is because of the variability in different manufacturers and what it may come back at. I don't want to stand up here and give you a number of 950,000. And, a year from now, as we progress and this goes to bid and it comes in at 1.2 million, you're going to say, hey, Mr. Shankus, what were you talking about? So, I mean, that's fine.
So you'd like us to be prepared for the high number. We're not putting it into this year's capital budget, but know that it's coming.
Know that it's coming.
That gives you the ability to start developing those specifications.
Yes, but we would ask for, I guess, a little, to the extent possible, okay, within your own restrictions. More than just, hey, next year we're going to be coming back to you, and asking the same thing. Because the process of building these bid specs is a lengthy and significant process. It's not like, going to the car dealer and saying, I want the blue one, right? There's going to be, if we're given the indication that it is likely that we're going to be able to proceed in the next capital budget with that purchase, then the fire department is going to go in earnest to start building these bid specs. Now, that's going to take, I can tell you, hundreds of man hours on the part of the department, the volunteers in the department, to build those specs. So, we're asking for some realistic indication that that's time well spent.
we can reasonably expect 20 years out of this vehicle.
I'm hoping 28 years out of it.
What's your oldest vehicle?
The oldest vehicle right now would be 6.7, which is a 1989.
Okay.
So
It's like 30.
yep.
Council President?
Do you have to
You
go?
gotta go?
Well, I don't have to. I mean, there's certainly other people that can respond. So
Just a quick, okay, yeah.
Can I just make a couple comments?
I just have one quick, how many vendors are available for these apparatus?
there's quite a few vendors.
There are? Okay.
The last
I was just curious if we were limited and, if,
right, and this is going off of my memory, but the last time we went to bid on a fire truck, I believe we received 3 bids. I may be wrong on that, but I believe it was 3 bids.
okay.
So
KME Pearson, somebody else.
right, but yeah. Yes.
I do understand your comment about you saying it's a lengthy and laborious process
Mhm.
to do these specifications, but that's something you have to do. And like I say, there are still some numbers we're looking for that we could get in the meantime, but you have a year to anticipate and work on this project and your project. You want it, you have to do the work.
Ma'am, I absolutely, I'm part of the volunteer fire service, right? So I have agreed to step up
Sharpen your pencil.
365 days a year to answer calls 24 hours a day
Yeah.
for people that I don't know.
But,
Right.
like I said,
So
it's something that has to be done, and you do understand that. And, you come back for the next year, be prepared and come back for our next, budget meeting at the first meeting and say, here's what I have, and you've got your homework done. And, then you're ready, you're prepared, and, we can, proceed with that. But, for next year, I think it's something to definitely, seriously consider, but, we'll cut out for you.
Well, as I said, many of us, and we're fortunate in this town, we have 30+ volunteers that do this, which is great. So we're certainly looking to do that. But again, we're looking for, a commitment from council too, that this is time well spent.
Well, just knowing that you are willing to put in this work, it is a, encouragement.
And thank you for it all.
Yeah, thank you for
Honestly.
your service.
Sure.
I think it does sound like you do need to go.
I will be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just a second, Council President, I have a
Thanks,
couple
Chief.
comments to make.
Yes.
Just to clarify on some of the questions that have been raised. We have a situation here where, and I was the chairman of the fire department, and we debated on whether we wanted to go with the pumper or with the ladder truck. And we finally made a decision that we would go with the pumper with the anticipation that we can get a couple more years out of the ladder truck. And I will tell you that as a member of the volunteer fire company back in the 70s, to present time, this ladder truck has been a thorn in the city. It has cost the city money in terms of breakdown as well as the reliability. Now, you can go out there and you can look at our fire trucks and you can say, well, how can this truck be in bad conditions, shiny and everything like that? It's a completely different story because we're looking at the mechanical as well as the physical aspects of the truck. And as I said, this ladder truck has been a thorn in our back since almost day one. And the intent was that once we had this last pumper, the ladder truck would be probably the next one because it has gone through the years where it's no longer useful. As the assistant chief said, our city profile and our buildings have changed, and the demands and needs for a ladder truck are still there. There's no way around it that we still need it. And in terms of response time, certainly, we have the mutual aid response from other municipalities, but the time factor. Now, many of you may not understand or realize that aspect. Pleasantville, where we had just recently, we had a massive fire over there, and fortunately, we were able to get there in time. But let's hypothetically say that our ladder truck broke down or we didn't have one, and we depended upon Pleasantville or another municipality. Keep in mind that they have to get their team ready, all right? And that's time, all right? That's a time factor. And maybe you and I can't appreciate in some of the episodes or situations where we have a fire, and that time factor, whether it be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, can make a big difference. All right, so we got to keep that in mind. Sure, we can get the response time, but you got to understand that situation there. So the repair history and the dependability is something that I think we have reached the point where council is going to have to make a decision and make that commitment. And I know that from my experience with the volunteer fire company, if council gives the go-ahead, this is not something, and I'm going to address Councilwoman Madden's situation and commitment. Once we get the commitment, it's going to be day one. They're going to be investigated. It's going to be a weekly meetings that they're going to have, and that entails going to these different companies and actually physically looking at the apparatus that we have. And keep in mind that all these apparatus that are being purchased by our city is customized. It's not like, as the assistant chief said, we just go there and say, okay, we like that color and we like that one, let's take it. These are customized, and they're customized to our needs in our municipality. We're different than Linwood and Summers Point and so forth. So these apparatuses that we purchase are customized, and therefore, they have to go through these different specs. And I know that, they're going to be if we give them the go ahead, they're going to be committed. And, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours. And some of us may not appreciate or understand if they were to come in and say, well, we need this and we need that, because these are the guys, obviously, that are going to be working with the apparatus. We need the apparatus that are dependable. We're sending out men and women out there to the fires. We got to make sure that they're fully equipped. And something of this apparatus has lost its, in my opinion, is long due to be replaced. This is over, 30-year-old apparatus, and it is not dependable. So I strongly urge council to really consider it. And I would also say this, that having been on a volunteer fire company, every year we have representatives, the officers and so forth, that goes to the fire convention down in Wildwood. And they spec out, they look and they talk to the dealers. All right. And I've been in the fire company since 1970s. I've seen the price of these ladder trucks rise dramatically. So when we talk about close to $900,000, which is a big chunk of change, this is not something out of the norm. This is certainly not out of the norm. And I know from working with these men and women that they will work the specs out and get the best price that they can get. They're not going for the luxury stuff, all right? They're going for the bare minimum that we definitely, and I have the utmost confidence. I'm not saying this because I'm a member of the volunteer fire company, but I have the utmost confidence in watching these men and women work on the specs of these trucks.
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So I strongly urge council to consider this and make some form of a commitment to the fire department.
Excuse me, Mayor, I hope you didn't misunderstand me because
No, I didn't misunderstand.
I've spoken with Captain Nixon, and I am aware of the problems you had with this truck. And a lot of it is computerized, because now they're all computerized. It's just, you can't just send a mechanic in with a wrench. So I know that this was coming, and I know, that the cost, I'm not surprised by these numbers in the cost. So I hope you don't mind me grilling you. I'm just asking you, I'm telling you that maybe I'm being like a teacher, that you have to do your homework. But I'm very supportive of the fire department. And if we can look forward to this, a plan on this for the next year, I certainly encourage you to go forward with working, doing what it takes to get everything on the table. And I'm sorry, Mayor, if you misunderstood me.
Councilwoman, but I'm just saying my viewpoints of saying, my experience with the fire department, both as the chairman and as a member of the fire company itself. So, no, I'm not criticizing. Actually, I'm supporting some of the statements that you've made.
So,
Thank you.
thank you, Mayor.
Thank you,
Thank
Council
you, Mayor.
President.
Sorry for interrupting. Yes, Paul.
Quick question. First of all, I like hearing that you're saying you will watch the budget on this. You're not looking for every gimmick and gizmo that's offered.
Right, if I can just go one quick,
Please.
anecdote. So the last piece of apparatus we bought, it was a 2014 Pierce. And that came in under $500,000. And I can tell you that neighboring towns, I heard this time and time again when I would see, brother and sister firefighters. How did you guys do that? How did you get that apparatus that you got for that price? It's an example of, we truly do.
Fiscal responsibility. Very good. And Pleasantville is a professional fire department, isn't that correct?
Yes,
So
They have a paid- they have a paid
bigger than
department.
volunteer.
A bigger department, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Councilman Ferry?
The warranty and the certification on the ladder, that would be something that I would be interested in the long run, How long would it be before we have to spend a lot of money to certify the ladder? I know that's been a big problem in the past, and the warranty on the ladder and the unit itself. I wouldn't have to spend any money for how many years, because I know that, I believe the ladder certification is considerable.
It's considerable, and NFPA requires an annual certification on the aerial device. But of course, new fire apparatus does come with a warranty.
I would be interested in on the actual
Details
chassis
of that.
and the additional equipment, what would be the long-term warranty for the community.
Certainly.
You are looking into an entire truck with an engine and wheels and a ladder?
Absolutely.
I don't think they
Not
want to
just
go
the
to the same
ladder,
thing we
right?
have.
Pieces.
Not- Okay,
Hopefully for 900,000. That would.
yeah.
Right.
I have a question for Dawn, and I think you got this answered earlier, but so how does it work? So we plan on, we say, yes, go ahead, shop your fire truck, and this goes into a new bond cycle. So how do you pay for it in the meantime?
As long as the authorization, which means you pass the ordinance, then you can start the process.
So we pay for it.
We pay for it either by doing temporary notes
I
or
see.
paying for it ourselves until we actually go out and fund it with a bond sale, right? There's different mechanisms. to do it, yeah.
But it won't be a burden on the taxpayers, right? It doesn't, this isn't going to increase the,
Well,
The
we-
tax
that's
rate for
why we
this year.
Try and do our capital plans in the 5-year cycle. So if one bond retires, we replace it with another
Right.
one.
so that'll come up in
It
the
depends
next
on
year.
what the council decides they want to spend their money on, so I can't say it's not gonna, what else are you gonna add into it?
Right.
What other?
Right, but that's for next year, not, it's not going to affect this year's rate.
Correct. You've already made a decision on
That's-
this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shankus, very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Been
thank
very
you for your time.
helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for your service.
Questions.
Thank you.
Let me get up first,
Yes,
before the chief starts, all right?
okay.
I'm gonna come up here because it's better.
As far as if we are deciding on the fire truck, if we want it, do we need to do anything at this point? There's nothing we need to do at this point. Okay. Thank you. That's what I thought. Just
You're welcome.
making sure before we move on.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you,
Mr.
Council
Mayor.
President, members of council. Pursuant to our last budget meeting, there were questions that you had asked me, and I also had some questions regarding some of the rationale and some of the questions that were raised within the police department. So last week I had a meeting, and they were here tonight. I asked them today to come. Lieutenant Bender, Captain Steinegger, and of course, Chief Newman. And I will tell you that it was a very productive meeting in respect to answering some of my questions and some of the questions that the council had asked. But I was open to a rude awakening, some of the things that we are currently doing which I feel is not being productive, and in some cases may cause some legal problems. I just want to address some of the points, and then I will allow the administration to come before you to answer any of the questions that you may have, as well as these points that were brought up in our meeting. One of them was, are we creating a top-heavy administration by adding another lieutenant? Why can't we cross-train other officers? We'll hire or increase in civilian employees to do additional work, administrative work, to lessen workload of the captain as well as the lieutenant. Comments on investigation or IA, and the chief will address that. How does hiring an additional officer benefit our department? Potential PBA grievances on the work duties and responsibilities that we may ask them to do or they're currently doing. And the concerns that the current administrative load that has been placed on the lieutenant, the captain, and the chief, and this would include their current duties and responsibilities in administration. One of the things I've learned, and I didn't, well, I knew a little bit about this, is that, for example, technology. We don't have anyone in-house as far as officially being involved in the technology of our radios and so forth. And I learned that, and I knew this, but I didn't realize, I thought it was part of his job description. The lieutenant he took on the duty, the responsibility, all right? And I asked him, well, why are you doing this? And he said, because there was nobody else to do it. And we needed, in the case several years ago, the radios, you know, as far as what kind of radios and the specs and so forth. So those were some of the highlights that we discussed in the meeting, and I'll turn it over to the chief of May, and he can elaborate and answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good, thank you. How are you, Chief?
Like the mayor pretty much set the table for me about the questions that you had. So I'll go through them and try to address them one by one as best as I can. And then I'll invite any other questions you have, you know, to me and to the, you know, to the police administration. Like you already introduced Capistonic is here to my left and Lieutenant Dettinger's to my right. So the top-heavy administration, that's a hard one because how do we define that? Your definition might be different than my definition, his definition of a top-heavy organization. I tried to look it up, see what a definition of a top-heavy organization was. You know, you can find out that it's not good, but nobody tells you actually what it is, as far as, you know, as far as what I saw. So, but I can tell you what we have, what we're doing now. If you can look on this one page by the organizational chart, I kind of made that up quick, but it doesn't show the whole picture. So I did add a little bit to it. So if you can follow along with me, you see the chief, the captain, and lieutenant. So if you just draw a line from the lieutenant over here and down, the lieutenant handles all the sergeants, the patrolmen, and the two, you know, special law enforcement officers, which are part-timers. That's 18 officers answering to the lieutenant. If you draw a line from the captain and down, you have the detective sergeants, and what is not pictured on your paperwork is the records folks, which is two, 1.5, you know, one full-time, one part-time, and 16 crossing guards. So that's 21. Now, I guess, you know, when you talk about, I always talk, you know, remember span of control, 5 to 7 people, and that's kind of like a rule of thumb and optimum. Well, we're clearly above that now with that. The other issue I see with this particular organizational chart is the captain's actually acting as a manager. So, you know, you have chief and a captain are essentially administrators. The captain is an administrator to assist me in doing my job and to handle situations in my absence and internal affairs. Essentially, he's acting as a manager, which is the lieutenant is a middle manager. He's acting as a manager for the detectives, the records, and the crossing guards. So he's actually doing a line function. The issue with that could be, I'm just saying could be hypothetically, there is something in the IA directive that says any internal affairs investigation should be one level removed. So essentially, a detective or patrolman should be investigated at a minimum by a lieutenant, one removed. A sergeant or any supervisor should be investigated one level removed which would be by the captain. Right now, as far as the captain's concerned and his responsibilities, we don't meet that requirement. Whether that becomes an issue, I don't know. Potentially, it could be an issue, but it's there. It's not nothing new. It's something that we've been, that's been there since, since we've eliminated that one lieutenant's position that's been eliminated. So in an optimum world, there should be no lieutenant in there handling these detectives, these records, and the crossing guards. What that would also do, now, one of the questions was how would that benefit the police department? So right now, we don't have any command level supervision from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to like 7 a.m., say at 8 a.m. in the morning. We just don't have that. So hypothetically speaking, if we had another lieutenant works 3 to 11 shift, we have a command level supervisor on from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 11 o'clock in the afternoon, and that shortens that time where there's no command level presence. We need a training officer. I think I spoke about that 2 meetings ago. We don't have a training officer. Training demands are getting increasing daily. We have resiliency coming up. We have the use of force coming up. These are all new directives that have been put out by the Attorney General's office, and some of them are 2-day trainings. Some of them are a little bit longer, 4-day trainings. We have our traditional firearms that are in service. So right now, the lieutenant does that as a collateral assignment. So I'll use that to segue into the next question, which I got, which was cross-training other officers. Cross-training officers, we actually do some of that now, because every officer pretty much in the department's got a collateral assignment. So, we have a sergeant that does firearms. We have a sergeant that is the supervising firearms instructor. We have an officer, patrol officer who handles our vehicle maintenance. That's a collateral assignment. Make sure all the vehicles are maintained. Make sure the monthly reports are done for the vehicles. We have one that handles our patrol bikes and make sure they're maintained. So those are all collateral assignments. So if we train an officer to do admin, that presents some issues. One I can think of immediately is equity and the potential to create an equity issue among the staff. Who do we pick? Is it handpicked? I don't have a policy that says we handpick the person to cross-train. Do we do it by seniority? Is that the most fair thing? Because then it eliminates anybody below them. There's not a standing test list, so we can fall back on that and say, well, you're next on the list. We'll bring it up there. That's one issue. Secondly, after a certain time, I think it's the 31st day by contract, we own pay. Whether they're assigned as an acting officer or not. If they're doing the duties, they can be paid after the 31st day. So you can be paying another administrator essentially by contract if we're cross-training them. So, and really the way to cross-train somebody will be to take them off the street from the patrol position now and then bring them up there. So they may be gone. And eventually you're going to want, you could theoretically wind up having to pay them for those duties that they're doing. So that's a couple of the pitfalls with, not, I shouldn't say pitfalls, that's some of the concerns with cross-training. Another part of the cross-training is, we have system rights, and Eric can talk about this, maybe if you have any questions for him, but we have system rights, certain systems that we don't allow everybody to see. I'm the chief, I can get into all the computer systems. Lieutenant and the captain can get into computer systems. We don't give rights to certain things, administrative rights on the computer systems to sergeants and patrolmen. Some of it's personnel issues, some of it's internal affairs issues, and they don't need to see that thing, so we don't give it to them. And we would have to change that. We could potentially have to change that if somebody's learning how to be a command on the command staff and assisting us. So there was a question about hiring a civilian. Civilians can't do internal affairs, can't do evidence. I mean, I don't know how we do that. I mean, a civilian does records. I mean, if I'm missing something there that I'm not seeing with that question, you can come back and address that. I talked about the benefits of hiring an additional person, and The PBA grievance, I think, that the mayor alluded to is, as I was talking about the acting pay, and who you, and like I said, maybe an equity issue where, who we're taking to cross-train. That's pretty much the questions I had that I wanted to address and go through. Can't see anything else in here that we went over, so I'll take your questions if you have any, and if you have any for the captain or lieutenant, we'll be happy to try to address them for you.
One of the things you mentioned was with technology.
Mhm.
So you don't use any outside companies, say a computer company, or
Well,
what
IT
technology,
person.
what difference of,
Payroll.
what's the difference in the technology department that you, I mean, if it's outside the range of,
We
A-
have-
all-
if
are
a
you-
workstation breaks, we'll call, our in-house computer tech. to fix that.
okay,
We have to fix the server for WatchGuard. If you want to jump in, come on up there, we can help you a little bit. We have servers for WatchGuard, we have body cameras, we have, items of that nature, we have computers in the cars. So
Yeah.
those are I think what we're talking about. We have radio programming.
So if
so you handle most of that, Lieutenant?
I'm sorry?
You handle a lot of that, Lieutenant?
Yeah, it's all me. So, but I think where you're going with the question as far as IT support and outside, like civilian. So we've had an IT provider not on site, which actually covers all of City Hall, which that contract's ending on March 1st, and we're going to a new provider. So I really don't know what their level of service is going to be like.
Okay,
I know what the contract says, but before we had an IT provider, I did everything IT. And then we got an IT provider, and it would be more like if something totally crashed and I wasn't comfortable fixing it, then you contact them. And then they had, I think, a 72-hour turnaround to get back to you. Workstation's down, okay, you can stop using it. But if it's something bigger, like
Right.
A networking issue, firewall, VPNs, things like that, those are things that have to be operational 24/7 because we have become
Right.
a 2021 police department. We've almost eliminated paper in daily operations. If we don't have those information technology systems, guys really can't do their job anymore because we don't do it on paper now. So where you're going with that, there's still going to be somebody that we call if we have a server that just completely crashed and it needs a RAID controller replaced or something like that. But IT incorporates so much more that those providers don't take care of, and it's the things that you see driving around in patrol cars. They're stacked with equipment. It's all IT related. That car has, and it's not just the computer and the e-ticket printer, but it's the radio, it's the wireless uplink to connect to the station, to bring the body cameras, wireless microphones, the internal cameras, the backseat cameras, and the networking between the body cameras and the cars. Those are all taking place with a wireless modem, and then you have LPRs that connect through the WAN connection so that we can get license plate reads on those cars, GPS tracking, etc. Those are things that I maintain on a day-to-day basis and not necessarily broken, but they do require a certain level of oversight, which also goes into command, oversight, and supervision. So it's not really a problem until it's broken. And we have vendors that provide those things. So the body cameras, if one breaks, I ship it back, they send me a brand new one. There's a maintenance agreement on that. Same thing with the in-car cameras and DVRs, things like that. But they need a human touch, and it's not contacting the IT service people. Usually I get the equipment, I diagnose the problem, I get the equipment, get the replacement, and either I put it in myself or I have the city mechanic take care of it. But that's not really a skill that I can teach to, or should teach to a patrolman or a sergeant, because really, there's a certain amount of rights and permissions to access those systems. We can't have non-command personnel with the ability to turn off the car camera or turn off the GPS, turn off the
Right.
microphone. We got to make sure that those systems are maintained 24/7, or we take them out of service until they can be fixed. So it's not really something we can pass on to somebody else. It's not really a job for our IT vendor because we can't leave something out of service that's a critical need for 3 days while we wait for them to come on site and tell us that you need a new part.
Or we'd have to get a different type of IT contract to have
Well, I mean,
a 24/7 response. I mean, is there anybody that even does that?
Is like, think of it like a Microsoft professional or somebody that specializes in networking and servers and databases and stuff like that. This is hands-on, more like a tech savvy person
Mhm.
bordering on a mechanic. And a lot of bigger departments have that type of internal support. We don't. So as we acquired all those systems.
Yeah,
I put them in. So
Yeah.
I know how they work, but I can't pass that on to somebody else. Is it necessarily a job for another lieutenant? Well, no, but I don't think it's a job for another police officer. One day, that's probably going to have to be done by somebody not a police officer, but not necessarily another lieutenant.
I mean, 20 years from now, you're not gonna, I don't assume you'll still be here.
I can
You
retire
might.
next year, and that's another reason I kind of been, motivating everybody to try to start thinking about these things because I'm eligible for retirement next year.
Oh,
So
Okay.
I've been doing this for quite a while now. Eric and I I was dispatching with him back in 1993 when there were no cell phones, there were no computers, there was no internet, there was no none of that stuff. GPS didn't exist.
Yeah.
We had maps and grid coordinates. And then, I've been here since '98. So.
He makes a good point with the, I mean, what he does right now is, we can't put a price on it for now, because even before when we didn't have an outside vendor before. We had no fail safe. So if he wasn't working, or if he went on vacation, or if he, injured himself and he was out, we had nothing.
Right.
We do have a fail safe, somewhat of a fail safe with the outside vendor, but that doesn't help all the things that he brought up to us. And that's something down the line, I agree with him that you're certainly going to have to look at, with some of the IT issues. And I don't see that going away. I see that actually becoming increasing the IT. I mean, it's just the world like this. Everything's IT based. So,
Do you know,
yep, yes.
do you know how other similar sized departments handle these types of issues?
which issues? You talk about the IT?
The IT issues, like you're speaking
Large
about,
ones have
Lieutenant.
them in-house.
Right, large ones, so similar size, I don't know if it's Linwood or Absega, I'm not sure, similar municipalities, how do they handle these types of IT issues?
I can't speak for Linwood or Summers Point. I mean, Egg Township has the entire staff
Yeah.
for their
Right.
IT related stuff. And they use vendors too. I mean, vendors are help, but they're not here.
Right.
I mean, some of it they can remote in and do. We know that they don't have to be on scene, but some of these folks can remote in, which we use for that.
That's tough with what you're saying is the hands-on stuff. That's tough. You can't remote in if you have to.
Right. So if a computer's not working, they remote in.
Right.
And they figure out what the problem is, and then tell you how much it's going to cost, or they fix it in a remote session. And I do that a lot from home myself, and it's small issues. The skill that you really can't teach people is figuring out what's wrong.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times the guys will say, oh, the camera isn't working in this car, the radio's not working in this car, or it's not uploading and something, and going in there and having the experience to know what to look for. And sometimes it's a trip to the mechanic because it's a blown fuse. Sometimes it's a part that I need to order from the vendor and then replace.
Right.
But again, it's a skill that really can't be taught.
Right.
Yes.
I have a question, Lieutenant. So you're virtually paperless now, which I would think would some time savings, from the old technique of writing everything down and all the filing that had to occur. What I'm hearing, it sounds almost like you need an IT. What
Yeah,
you need,
support staff.
to bump up a couple of officers. Has there ever been at the police department in any recent history, a time specific, job study at where people are spending their time and how that time is spent. And, is it possible to bring a civilian in, for instance, for IT, to handle some of these issues? Because, listen, I wish we had unlimited budget, but revenues are down 5%. And, we gotta hit the taxpayer, or we've gotta cut costs to make up for that 5% loss. And, hopefully as the economy picks up, and property values pick up, the future budgets will be a little more relaxed. But we do have that constraint this year. But by the same token, it sounds like we got a lot of technology going on there, and that really, an IT civilian.
Hire
would be
an
a-
IT
would be a better
person.
hire.
Yeah, exactly.
So
For
yeah,
much,
for you.
Some point you're gonna have, yeah.
well, you can do it
Some
now.
point you're gonna have to address it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it actually sounds like a more immediate need with all this technology you guys are dealing with.
Absolutely, and that's what I've had them saying, that,
yeah,
I'm not
I
here.
think that's the route
You won't
that
have
we
that
should be
person-
looking at.
Something happens to you,
Right,
we're SOL.
yes.
Excuse me, I mean, Paul, Mr. Russ has a very good point about increase in taxes, and I know the city is in good financial shape, but not all the citizens of Northfield are, and they struggle to pay the taxes, and, we were talking about almost a 3% increase with this addition, and I'm looking at these numbers here, like I say, we can hire a secretary and an IT tech, tech for less than the salary of, upper management officers. And I think that's the route you have to look at and do some time studies. And I was looking at this, and a lot of these things are secretarial and can be done by
Could you elaborate on that? 'Cause
payroll. I used to do payroll when I was a secretary. Payroll,
Secretaries don't do payroll. Here,
I used to do payroll. I did it for
On police
125
department, does it.
people, not just 24.
You don't
Payroll's
even have
not a,
access to it. And I
but-
don't even know if payroll's in your description.
and I think if
I
you
have to
look
check
at some
that
of
one out.
these collateral assignments, they could be done by support staff. And like you were saying about IT tech, I mean, you can almost hire 2 people for less than it costs to, for a salary for a lieutenant. And also the total budget impact from 2020, it goes from less than 25,000 to 94,000 over 4 years. That's a huge tax burden from this, the salary schedules. This includes raises and benefits, and I guess all the total budget impact for 4 years. That's a huge difference. And it's not sustainable for this city. Hopefully things will be better. And like I say, with the problems we're having this year with school crossing guards and other, COVID and other unforeseen issues, I think you should really explore civilian assistance where you can really, where it can benefit you the most.
In your assessment, you said only payroll. I don't think, there's nothing else on here.
How about, what does records mean? Records filing?
We'll just assume what you're saying is correct.
What's extra duty details coordinator? What's in special
Well,
events?
because every
What's
time a
police officer
contract-
scheduling?
every time a
Scheduling
contractor
is,
calls up- I'll answer your question. Every
Yes.
time a contractor calls up on pipe breaks out the street, or when, let's say they need a traffic control for Tilton Road, whatever, they're gonna pave it or whatever, they call up and we arrange that. It's assignments, it's fair and
Assignments.
transportation. It's stuff that's traditionally something that, records have things to do also. They have
Yeah.
discoveries. They have
But like I say, I think
they
you're-
have things like- We don't give the records that.
you're so used to police officers doing secretarial work.
Yeah, so this-
Really,
this is
it's work that can, maybe you just need to rethink how you, how your, some of your assignments that can be
Captain really
done
shouldn't
by
even be doing
civilian people. It doesn't have to all be done by lieutenants and captains and
So,
sergeants.
This is where I'm going with this, and not to mention the direct supervisory, but we haven't, without another person, and we're never gonna remedy that.
Yeah, I think you need to concentrate more on police work and try to divert some of the support duties to IT or secretarial
We
or
don't
that
have an
type of
IT
thing.
person. We just decide-
Well, that's
just
what I'm
decide
saying. You could hire a secretary and an IT person probably for much less than a lieutenant.
What time's payroll gonna be done in the morning? Excuse me? What time's payroll due in the morning?
Can I help on the extra duty and officer scheduling? So I understand what you're saying, and
Yeah,
right,
please help
usually-
me out here.
I'm sorry?
Please help me out here.
No, I think we're kind of talking about two different things. So let's just try to clear this up. So yes, you're correct. In a lot of places, the payroll and scheduling and stuff like that would be done by an administrative assistant type person, a civilian. The police officer scheduling system is how we control the overtime and signups for shifts and the extra duties. The extra duty, like the chief mentioned, we have, like when Pioneer Pike was out here working on Shore Road for weeks and weeks, there's apps that I set up for guys so that they can sign up for those jobs. When we sign up for jobs, there's a fairness rotation. So it's a supervisory task within the police department, a command task to see to those assignments being distributed fairly and updating the hours to make sure those guys get paid for. That generates a report that goes to payroll. We don't kind of separately, but that police officer scheduling system also maintains all the time records for all the officers, all the time off they have. And we roll over their time from the previous year. And then there's approvals for time off and switches and things like that, where that's a supervisory function of patrol commander because these guys are making switches and somebody one step above.
I'm pretty well versed in timekeeping.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's why it's not something that we could ask Barbara to do, to approve switches between people. It's a command supervision type of task.
And if there's and how do I answer that question? Let's say there is a discrepancy in an hour off, or 12 hours off, or something like that. How do I answer that to the city administrator? Well, Barbara, the secretary, does it. I have no idea. So there's no command level interaction there. If she's doing that, I mean, and in reality, is that her job? I don't even know if it's, like I said, I don't even know if it's in her job description. I can pull it and see, but,
Well, that's
I
what we're
just don't- I just
suggesting
don't
is
think
maybe
that's-
to look
I don't
at
think that would be
other
appropriate
support
in that particular
staff for
circumstance.
things like payroll and scheduling and IT.
But it's more
That's
than
what we're
just- it's more than
suggesting.
just- More than just doing payroll. There's like you said, you just go backwards into that. It's more than just that. Now, it kind of, the scheduling system kind of does generate its own reports. So, it's not really that labor intensive.
Council President, I may just say, I don't want to, lean too heavy on this administrative responsibilities and duties. That's just one aspect of the reason why I'm requesting that, Lieutenant. But also keep in mind that the motive that I've also was looking at this, and you mentioned getting these officers doing police work. And add another officer, it's my opinion that that's going to help with the police work. But also the other aspect, you remember I talked about, you just heard just a moment ago that Lieutenant Denninger has only a couple more years. And if he leaves or he retires or the captain retires or the chief retires, who do I have in terms of experience? All right. And with all due respect, and I'm not trying to criticize the chief, but when he was promoted to the position, he had no administrative experience. All right. And it's not been an easy road for him. And I think he's done a terrific job. I'm looking down the road as the mayor, and I don't know if I will be the mayor or whoever will be the mayor 3 years from now. I don't want council to be in a situation where we don't have the experience of someone who has gone through the trials and tribulations of being a Northfield officer and knowing what's going on and having the familiarity of the department. Sure, we can hire someone from outside, but there's no guarantee that we're going to have that situation where someone's coming in from the outside or what we're going to be able to negotiate. I'm dealing with what I have at hand. All right. I'm dealing with the fact that, number one, I should say eliminated, when we did negotiations, a lieutenant. All right, to cut costs. That was part of the rationale. And the PBA agreed to it. All right. But I also understood that meant that there was this void that someone would have to pick up with that lieutenant. All right. I mean, it just didn't disappear. And now that over the years, we're having more responsibilities and duties that have been having laid on upon the administration and the police department. All right. Number two, all right, I need the experience. You know, I need these guys to start getting into the department and knowing and moving up the chain as with any kind of scenario that we have. And number three, by having another police officer and, you know, we all went through this situation where we had acting positions and we eliminated and we were down, we were behind from what we originally had. I'm trying to build it up and I will go on the record right now that if council lets me have another officer, this is probably going to be the last time I'm going to be asking you. All right, because unless there's some kind of emergency. All right, I feel confident that having another officer added to the role is going to address some of that police work that you were talking about. One of the positions that we have eliminated, all right, because we don't have the staff, is a traffic officer. All right. So that's just one job that I know that we don't have anyone in that response. We did have it about a year ago, but because we were shorthanded now, that position has been not filled. All right. We have someone trying to do some of the work there. So, I don't know everything within the management and of the police department. I'm still learning. As I said, it was a rude awakening for some of the things that I learned when I had this meeting. All right. So these are part of the reasons, rationale that I am coming to city council for this addition. It's not just one because of administration. All right. There are other factors in this whole proposal that I have made before city council. Thank you, Council
The
President.
position of traffic officer, we had that, like you said, a couple of years ago, but it became a shell game. Because every time somebody would go up, we had to take the person and move them over. Now, they were pretty cooperative with us, and we moved them back to the street. But I loved having that position. It was fantastic, because every time, a resident complains about speeders, go over there, take care of it. And, we did wind up cross-training, on the topic of cross-training, we did wind up, because really, Lieutenant Denzer was the only person that could handle serious and fatal accidents in Northfield. So now we have layers now. So we're good that way, because we looked ahead strategically and said, well, he's not going to be able to do it, so let's train some more officers who are willing to do it. So we did look down the road at that, and like I said, the traffic thing just didn't work for us, because it just didn't work out. I mean, not that it didn't work, it was working, it just didn't work out for us because we had to pull from it all the time and backfill, and then it becomes a scheduling nightmare. I think somebody mentioned the study. There was a study done probably in the 90s. I don't know where it is. I haven't seen it, but that wouldn't be relevant today. I think somebody asked me that when the last study was done, but it wouldn't be relevant. Yeah. That's the only one that I know of, and I've never even seen the thing. So
What is the you're talking about, what's the traffic officer actually? What is the traffic officer, the traffic department? What was it you were just speaking of? I'm sorry.
We had two officers.
The traffic
assigned
unit?
to it. We had two officers. Well, years ago, but you want to go a little bit of history, we had a sergeant assigned to traffic. So that was eliminated, and the position was never filled. So the way our numbers were at a particular time, and I saw the need, and what I would do is assign two officers of traffic, so they handle our 12-hour shifts. We had whatever during the week, and we could split them up. So we always had a traffic officer on.
So they were dedicated, they're just dedicated to all that type of.
Traffic enforcement, traffic accidents. They would do, what else would they get involved with? They would handle the speed, when we went out and did the speed studies and things like that. They would handle that and be an assistant to the lieutenant, so we didn't have to do a lot of that work. Yeah. Work zones, another one.
Okay.
So, the biggest from a chief standpoint, the biggest help for me was not only the work zone, that was huge, but just answering the residents' complaints about speeders and people running stop signs. We could get somebody out there, we could document those enforcement directed patrols, and we can bring them up when somebody says, at my corner, I have everybody, blowing the stop sign, or they're doing 60 miles an hour. We can bring that up and say, look, we've been out there enforcing it for the past, month. And we had that all documented. I mean, we still do that to an extent, but having somebody dedicated to that was a good thing.
Chief, you could just turn on the news and things are changing very rapidly. The marijuana issue, or the legalization of marijuana in children and so forth. Are there state mandates that that actually are giving you guys more things to do per se? And does this, impact your work during the day? And does it, is it something that could potentially be an issue down the road?
I don't want to stick my neck out too much because it's literally, it's brand new.
Mhm.
We were on a meeting yesterday with the AD's office. They were explaining, on a go-to-meeting, they were explaining it. It's a big change for us. As far as, it being more burdensome, I don't know if I could quantify it that way, but it's a change. We've been doing things a certain way for so long, and this is changing the world. The world has changed overnight, and we haven't even hit the regulated cannabis part of it yet. That's not going to come until later. The regulated, you have to understand, there's CDS cannabis, which is illegal, and it's even today, to this day, it's still illegal over certain amounts. It's a lot higher than it used to be. And we're not getting into weeds too much. You have to give warnings even for distribution. It's insanity. And it goes for alcohol too, and underage possession of alcohol is basically wiped off the books. So
Is this that's just one change, but
That's
there's
just one
there's a
change.
lot of changes.
Yeah.
But is this something that potentially, if we're not prepared for, could we be, upside down at one point and be liable for certain things?
So police can be, there's liabilities in there built into that, which is really disturbing. Because like I said, it changes the way we're going to have to do things, and people are going to have to get used to it and proceed very cautiously. Because if we ask an underage person, which is under 21, for consent to search, it's a third degree official misconduct. That's bad. I mean, that's go to jail and lose your job and your pension and your home and everything else.
And if you don't have somebody managing this at that particular time,
As far
that's
as-
an incident.
I mean, that's the biggest burden as far as I'm concerned. Now, I mean, you may not want to hear this, but like I said, there's the cannabis now, then there's the regulated part of it. The state's got to come out with some kind of a commission. I think it's going to be under Treasury or something to regulate the sale of regulated cannabis. This is my understanding. I am by no way an expert, so I mean, I want to be careful here, but so this is just kind of, we're just like at an in-between mark. So when we get to that stage, how are we going to regulate? How are we going to? How's a person, officer on the street, going to figure out what's legal and what's been bought off the street? I don't know. Is it going to be more expensive to buy it in the store than on the street corner? I would think, common sense would tell me it might be, but and how are you going to? I have no clue. So I mean, there's a lot more to it without getting too much of the weeds, but that you have to keep on a radar screen with that.
Yes,
First of all,
Councilman
the
Lutz.
mayor's comment about the lack of experience. You do have 8 guys with more than 15 years experience. So that's a pretty deep bench. I know they have to be trained in each of these positions, but you got a pretty deep bench going already.
Yeah, I understand that, a deep bench, but we don't have anyone in the administrative.
And they're not being trained. What worries me more, I mean, you guys are probably all familiar with a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, is this IT issue that the lieutenant brought up. That if something happens to him, we don't have, how much time would you think, averaging out over the course of an average week, looking at a year, if you spent calibrating this, fixing that? A couple hours a week? More than that. More than that? Yeah.
You need an
3
IT
hours, 4
person.
hours a week?
That comes and goes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, I'm trying to average.
Sometimes a serious problem might take me a couple days before I figure it out, or I get some, assistance with it. Sometimes I know exactly what's going on in a particular way. It's hard to say.
You need
This
a,
is a bigger concern.
yeah, you need
We
a
are-
dedicated
It's
IT
a
person.
completely technologically oriented police department.
Yes.
And if something happens.
Well, I will just say this, that
Yeah,
several
I
years ago.
don't see the
we,
proposal as solving that.
Yeah.
The
because-
proposal the proposal we have right now doesn't,
Won't fix that problem.
that problem will never
But
go.
just to address, I mean, several years ago, as a councilman, we came across this problem. We tried to find someone to be an in-house, and we even tried to have a co-op with the local school district, but it didn't work.
No, I see this more as an inner police department.
And it wasn't just police department, it was for the entire city.
Yeah, but I'm saying for the police department's equipment is so specific. That it would seems that you need somebody. who's
You need
trained
an
in that
IT
equipment
person, yeah.
that Could go from town
That's
to
it.
town and, be that person. But that concerns me.
Well, I mean, and I understand where you're coming from, and that was only one of my concerns, that if any one of these upper management, let's put it administrative, was to retire or leave, there would be a void. There will be a void, because I can't go now to a sergeant, and let's assume the sergeant passed the exam, with having the administrative qualities and experience. And as I said, I'm not trying to criticize the chief here, but that was the scenario that was given to me when we went to a full-time chief back then, all right? We had, Chief Newman did not have, with all due respect, some of the administrative qualities or experience. He was a sergeant, correct?
I was in the acting,
Well,
I was in an acting position as a lieutenant and as a captain, but we also had, we did have a chief for a while, and, I was doing more like what he was doing, but not the IT part of it, more the personnel side of it.
Right.
So, but when all of a sudden, when you move up a couple levels, it changes things, and, you start seeing different lens, you know what I mean?
And I'm not saying that was the very scenario, it's something that I experienced.
I didn't have anybody to turn to for a question when they walk out the door, and then when they retired. So-
IT is a pretty specific skill set that apparently the lieutenant has, but maybe those 7 people under him don't. I'd like to see that addressed prior to adding another patrol.
Yes.
Because
Well-
it really looks to me like a real weakness in our department.
Well- As I said, that's only one aspect,
agree.
and I'm looking at the whole picture, and I completely agree with you. But that was my proposal. I was looking more towards the orientation of my thoughts with the police department, not with the IT, all right? So I saw that, number one, that we have 3 upper management that could retire in a couple years. No one in that, in terms of spacing, if they qualify, they moved up from sergeant, because there's certain qualifications that they have to have before they can take the chief's test or the lieutenant or the captain's test. All right, so that was part of my scenario. Number 2 is trying to get back to the full squad of having another officer. We've already, over the years, as the mayor, we'll put police presence, as Councilwoman Madden pointed out. We now have a motorcycle patrol, all right, with the lieutenant. We have a bike patrol that we're instituting. I try to put someone into the school district, as far as, the presence as and also the protection and so forth. So these are some of the things that I have been working to try to address police presence and protections and responsibilities within the city and how it shows up, all right, and the appearance and so forth. So this is my overall singing, and I, like I said, I don't disagree with any one of you and your points and things. It's just something that I am looking at.
Well, when you were just mentioning the tests, are the tests required to get the positions? Oh, you have to pass the test in order to be,
That's in your ordinance, that's in the city's ordinance.
it is,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Now, like I said, I would love to have a command level after. I'll be straight with you. I don't need another manager on day work. I don't. I need somebody 3 to 11. I need somebody on that back end.
Well, it still leaves you with nobody from 11 till
The midnight,
7.
The midnight traditionally that I just know, from my memory, has never been covered by a command level personnel. But there was somebody here till like 11 o'clock at night. There was a lieutenant here to 11, like I said, before we eliminated the position. And that makes a difference. It really does, because, you can see the change when there's no, it's like, what do they say, when the cat's away type thing, but, so it's a weakness. You were talking about the weaknesses.
Yeah, so Chief, you can explain to me, so you have a sergeant on duty?
You have a sergeant.
Correct? But so what is the difference in terms of command position to have that next level of administration?
Best way I can explain it is a sergeant's a supervisor and the lieutenant's a manager. So, it's the best, that's the easiest, simplest way that I can explain it to you. The lieutenant's a middle manager. It's just another level of supervision. They're removed from the squad, they're removed from the asset.
You have a supervisor on.
Services, but they can also say if we have an emergency, if we have a serious emergency, They're also now an on-scene commander. All right, we have somebody here at that particular time to set up a command post, to be in charge until the next higher rank gets there. There's somebody there. Now, not that a sergeant wouldn't do that anyway. I'm not trying to say that, but when you have a command level personnel on scene, it just makes it that much different.
Are you and other people on call? So if there's an emergency.
My phone's always on. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, you know, we come in at night for things where we had to, and, you know, if it could be handled by the sergeant, they handle. Most of them do. And, you know, I'm not trying to knock down what they do. They do an outstanding job. And 90% of the time, they'll handle it, you know. So if it, you know, if something really hit the fan, God forbid, you know, we would have somebody here. You know, and it's an additional person on scene and station to back up officers if they need them. In this case, to make if you have to make a command decision, so to speak.
Councilman Smith?
Chief, I'm looking at the command structure and everything, and I understand completely what you're looking for and what the needs are. Obviously, we're faced with difficult budgetary constraints this year, given that we're in especially, I mean, normally we deal with that anyway, but in this year with the circumstances nationwide and COVID, and we're all aware of that, it's certainly problematic, and we have to be considerate of, more so than ever, the demands on the taxpayers. So with that, you know, all being out there, and we all understand that, is it a possibility where, just to kind of find an intermediate solution where maybe we promote one of the sergeants but don't hire a patrolman to give you that layer? And maybe I mean, I don't know, I'm not going to profess to know the demands on the structure in each of the individuals, but if we have a detective sergeant and two detectives, is it possible, this is just a scenario that let's say one of the sergeants, maybe the detective sergeant, gets promoted to lieutenant, and they don't have a detective sergeant, or I don't know how you would handle it, but we don't hire another patrolman, but it gives you that other layer of administration to help compensate without taking on the burden of, it's not a burden, but we understand the financial burden of hiring a new patrolman, but it gives you that layer of administration to help cover your needs while still finding a middle ground, in a sense, between taking on the responsibility of hiring a $100,000 a year position for 25 years.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, yeah, it's possible, but you're just going to short. You're going to have to pick a squad and short. And you know how that's going to shake out morale-wise. And I mean, you have to consider that factor, because some squads going to be less short, and they're not going to be happy. And you know, that's the only thing I would say is that you're going to short one squad, and you know it's going to impact their potential to take time off, or their potential on vacations, or whatever it may be, or the manpower situation on the street, whatever that case may be. You know, have we had 3-man squad? I mean, you know, we're at 4-man squads, and we work. You know, we put a lot of work into bringing that back. You know, with the city's help, obviously, but you know, I don't know if I'd want to. I get what you're saying, but to put the shortage on the street is really not, you know, the goal. You know what I mean? I guess it's really not the goal here. You know, looking at the big picture is not to short the street, and that's a really important part of it.
Right, sure.
The whole pie. You know.
What happens if we decide to hire one officer to pass on promotions this year?
We would have to make some assignments. I mean, I could bring back a traffic officer. I could create something, you know what I mean? Because it would uneven, there would be a fat squad, so to speak. You know what I mean? If you added a fifth personnel, I could push somebody or switch somebody over to bringing back the traffic position. And that's just one option. You know what I mean? You could give somebody maybe a shot at being a detective. Add another detective in there. I don't know that we need that. I would have to look at that very closely. But, you know, that's you know, two of the things that come immediately to mind. So.
you have something? Yes.
Chief, the job description for the lieutenant, I guess I would be interested, and I know the promotion policy and things of that nature, but I guess the IT requirements and stuff like that aren't really to the point where, Lieutenant Dettinger's doing. I mean, that to me looks like that would be hard to fill with somebody coming through the ranks. I mean, that's a talent that not everybody has at all. I just don't know about the job description itself, if it could be segregated out to somebody to be able to handle it in the future like he does.
So, I mean, like I said, we were fortunate to be in this position. We didn't even, so before, we didn't even have the outside thing to come in. And,
Technology changes every day.
and technology changes by the hour, so to speak, but, I mean, I don't
What
believe
about-
IT is in a lieutenant's job description, if that's
No,
where you're
they
going
have
with
people
this.
that do that.
We have we're saving money.
Oh, to do that?
We're saving a lot
Yeah,
of money
yeah.
with this. I mean, especially when it comes down to, the radio programming. I'm sure there are departments in Northfield that send the radios out to program. We have ones in-house. So it made, and when we let them do radios, it made that jump a lot easier and a lot easier for me to digest because he was there to do that. Plus, we'd have to be sending it out and calling them up and, it'd be a head scratcher for me because I'm not an IT person, in the least bit.
I mean, Chief, under the current structure, the sergeant, the administrative sergeant tasks, is there a sergeant that does any of that, or is that something
We
that's,
don't have an administrative sergeant.
or they're
That's one of the
precluded from,
years.
they're precluded from doing that because of the chain of command, if you
Yeah,
will?
it's not that I'm precluded, but we just don't have a position, we don't have an opening for it. I don't have the position. I mean, there's nobody that can fill the position. I'd have to either create a sergeant or take a sergeant from working the street and put it in an administrative position.
Okay, instead of being outdated.
We may have had one somewhere along the lines of Ronnie Cohen, somebody going back.
We had an administrative sergeant that took care of the court liaison functions, special officers.
Many years ago.
Maybe when I was on council before. I don't know.
So I do those jobs now.
Okay. I mean, obviously, this is a common discussion we have. We get to this point and we're trying to close out a budget with only pennies left in room. And it makes it very difficult for us sitting as council people because you provide a vital task for us. I would like to be able to say, let's work on this over the next year and plan for it.
Yeah, do that.
Let's figure out how to fill those major problems we've discussed today. Let's figure out how to solve those and plan for getting what we truly need. If we need to restructure, get everything in place, get everything rolling this year so that we can be prepared at our budget season with everybody fully invested, all of us participating and all of us willing. And again, as I said, prepared. I know that puts you back. I know that affects you now that you have to live with your current shortfalls for another year, but I would like to commit to helping you. I'm a numbers guy, so I can help you all year long, as much as you like, as much as you're willing to share them with me. But I think that is something we can easily do. I mean, obviously wouldn't be doing anything right now, but kind of pushing it along so that we can maintain a budget this year in while we're still sitting in this uncertainty. Again, we've talked about that at the past meetings, how we've been fortunate enough this year that that our residents have been able to meet that property tax demand. Going forward, as we're still in the same spot we were a year ago, or 9 months ago. hopefully things will turn around. And like I said, I hate to be talking like this to tell you that I don't know that we can put it in the budget, but because we rely on you. You are vital.
I appreciate you giving me the time. certainly do.
I appreciate all of your time and all the information.
Thank you,
And
thank you for answering all the questions.
I see what you're gonna do when you retire. Couple other goals in the plan. Be a good business though. Go around.
I don't know.
Handling their IT.
Anyone else have any? Okay. I guess with that, I think we're maintaining where we are with the current budget. Is there? Again, thank you.
Yeah, how
I'm
do we
sorry to bring you
stand
out
now
here
with the
and put you through all this and not achieve what your goal was. When I tell you I'm committed to you guys and going forward, I will work with you and we'll figure out how to get it to work for next year.
And not for nothing, Council President, but I think you're right. I think, with the shared court service and with the losing the crossing guard, extra time, that next year we will be in a better position
We're assuming, but I hate kicking the can because you don't know what happens next year. I'm sure when you sat here last year in the budget meetings, you didn't expect a pandemic this year. And again, we do have a lot of residents that are in situations and we're just trying to maintain what we can.
Council President.
Yes.
You and I discussed and I put Councilman Smith in the loop here. I just want to let everyone know that with the Atlantic County Court Administration proposal, I have some more numbers and figures that I presented to the Council President and I'll share with Councilman Smith. But I made a recommendation to the Council President that things are starting to firm up more, and I would suggest that we have some more participation from City Council. I mean, I've been to the meetings, but I'm only one voice and ear on that, so that's my suggestions. But the proposal is coming out pretty soon.
You have this number to share with council?
Yeah, I think he just got it done right before this meeting, so it wasn't a firm number, was it?
It's not a firm number because they're still working, but I can tell you that from what we spent from the past 3 years and what the county would propose, and based on past year of revenue, that we would come out maybe, and don't hold me to it, but somewhere around about 35,000, a little bit more.
$35,000 savings was what you told me.
Was
but I mean,
savings,
you-
right. We would gain with the revenue, because revenue goes up and down every year, as everyone knows. But that's only one aspect, the financial aspect, but the other one is simply the framework and physical work of what having the county be in charge of or responsible for the cost for maintaining the courts itself and providing the security, which the Atlantic County Sheriffs, which I understand would be involved in their services there. One question, and again, I can't get off the topic here because we're budget here, but virtual is here to stay. So there was a concern about the expense within the budget, about having officers go to Mays Land and so forth. But the virtual aspect, and this is from one of the Superior Court judges that's involved in the case study here, is something to stay, and that's something to address and concerns here.
Mayor, what is the timeframe that the county's?
They, right now, and I will tell you this, that originally we had 13 municipalities out of the 23. And at last night's meeting, there were 5 more municipalities that joined the meeting. So it looks good in terms of, obviously the more people we have gets the thing moving faster. Part of the hang up is with the legislation that Senator Sweeney has presented to the committee, which I believe is coming forth pretty soon for the vote. So that's one aspect that gives the creation of a county joint administration. And once we get some of the other communities firmed up with the numbers, we're looking probably near the end of this year.
That suit
Yes,
to take off and
yes, if not January 2022. The courts themselves, the building and the facilities is there. I mean, there's a little odds and ends and everything, but it's already been, they're using 3 existing court building rooms within the court building, the inmates landing.
Brian, what is the time frame of the Hamilton, is it?
Yes.
It's 3 years? We have to be
Two.
there for.
It's,
After 2 years,
well, it's a
we can
10-year,
opt-
it would be a
it-
10-year
yeah.
agreement with
To opt
a 2-year commitment. You could opt out after the second year
After the second year with a year's notice.
with a year's notice,
So it's a
correct?
3-year, okay. To me, that's a 3-year contract.
But we might also have, we're still working on the language. There's the potential we might have language in there that if a county court were to be established and provide greater savings, that we could potentially move to that without that. But that's potential language. I don't want to,
That would be up to them
Yeah.
to agree to,
correct.
if that was the case. Okay, so 3 years.
Mayor,
Unless they agree to something
$35,000
different.
That's an annual savings. Is there more in the first year? Because I know they're looking at some kind of. grant.
Yes, there's a couple grants. As a matter of fact, today they submitted the grant to the state, which is, I think, approximately $150,000 just to that particular grant. There are other grants, but I don't know them offhand. The municipality would be eligible to apply for.
That'd be spread through all the
That would
municipalities.
spread over the whole
That's
thing,
probably
yes.
Mostly for infrastructure anyway, that they need to establish to get all the service, all those
Yeah,
different municipalities.
And that wouldn't cover any cost for the additional cost for police that have to travel if they didn't have, if they couldn't
No,
do it.
no, I don't think so.
That won't cover
No.
any of that. If it was remote and they had to spend a day
Yeah.
in, whether it be the county or across the street at the Hamilton.
It'll be a full-time court. I mean, 5 days a week, 2 sessions.
A lot of details in that, like how they organize it versus something else.
Yeah,
You know.
the main concern was trying to get some firm numbers here. And, we're basing on the averages of the 3 years for Northfield itself. So counting in the revenue and what we would pay for the county itself, we would probably come out ahead around $35,000. And as more municipalities join, it could increase, as well as decrease.
The
if
savings,
counties
the
don't,
savings could increase as more.
That we
as
would
more-
get.
That we
We would get.
Okay. And then, Brian, the savings with the other option?
Well, the terms of the proposed contract, should we approve it, would be $80,000 per year. We're currently spending $140,000, $145,000 for our shared agreement with Linwood. So potentially it could be, and depending on the number of the revenues, it's in that range, I guess. If you subtract that and do the math, that's $65,000. But anything over $80,000 in revenue, we would split 50-50 with the Township of Hamilton. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So there's really no drawback to not being in the initial court system, since that 150 will probably get divided or used on infrastructure. So even if we enter in year 3, we can still realize those savings if they materialize. And whether or not they agree to let us out early because of the county court system.
That's just a
It's
plus.
a 3-year commitment.
That would be a plus of the contract. if that was-
I will say in the one meeting that the mayor invited me to for the county court system that I attended, I did ask a question about would there be costs if we didn't come in right away? And they did seem to reply or indicate that there might potentially be some additional costs if we didn't get in on the ground floor, so to speak, that there might be some type of fee. I'm not even sure, Mayor, if that he didn't have specifics on that. There was just discussion about because you didn't partake in the initial startup that you might have to pay. I don't know what it would look like, but there may be a fee to join in at a later date, but that wasn't anything that was finalized.
In sales, we call that fear of loss.
Yeah. I don't really agree with that. especially from a county entity, but it's okay.
Anyone on council have any other budgetary issues, questions?
I'd like to readdress the emergency management stuff, the equipment that they're, suggesting or requesting, is there any way that we can possibly eliminate one vehicle, maybe just get one vehicle this year? It's a hefty number, so I know they have one vehicle currently, although it's not perfect, but I think it's seriously consider one vehicle this year and the second one off, I don't know when, but at least 1 year, this year, get one vehicle, and all the other things, the radios, I think, are important. All adds up.
I'd like to concur with Greg on that, Councilman Deweese, because, number one, you stagger the technology, because new technology is always coming along, and you get to see what you're getting for the significant expense before you roll in another one, which could go into the next capital.
Yeah, we have a fire truck coming in.
Well, that would just change the bond issue, Dawn, would that,
Yeah, I could just take it out. It would reduce our bonding. Our bond.
So currently, our debt service is $800,000 a year, is that correct?
Mhm.
So, once this bond goes through, does that remain stable, or will that increase to some significant amount?
That's gonna increase a little bit,
A little bit?
but yeah, because what happens is we'll put our principal payments, we'll stagger them a little farther out until that other bond, the principal payments start going down. And what happened, we got a little off kilter 2 years ago because the ACIA did a group bonding with a lot of different towns altogether, so we funded early. But we've been putting money aside in a reserve for debt service in our capital fund, so we'll start drawing from that to pay off some of the debt service as well.
that'll
So,
help stabilize it.
right,
Any idea what the impact on debt service would be?
we're trying to keep it stable.
Stable.
Yeah, that's our goal.
I mean, does it make sense to take one vehicle? I mean, how much of a hit is it?
We would take about $40-some thousand out of that plan on a $4 million bond. It probably doesn't really matter. But just because we have it in the authorization and just because we have it in the ordinance, doesn't mean you have to buy it now. We can wait to do it. And there's this phase, you're approving this plan, then you're gonna approve the ordinance. And then the third and final step would be for council to approve the actual purchases.
I see.
So it could-
Another bite at the apple.
It could be in the plan, but
well, we could
Because it's
stagger
more
it,
than 17.5, so it will come to council for approval.
at very least, we can stagger it.
Right, sure. You can say, you know what, let's just buy one this year and we'll get another one next year.
okay.
Or 2
Well-
years from now. The ordinance doesn't go away until you take affirmative action to cancel it. And if it's funded at that point in time, we would just take that money and put it back into the capital fund so you could reappropriate it for something else. Yeah.
What about, maybe it's just a drop in the bucket, but the auditorium seating,
Mhm.
it's $25,000. Does that make much of a difference, or is that
No.
also something that can be,
Doesn't make much of a difference
Okay.
as far as this
that's
plan.
little stuff,
Right,
it's like 25 cents?
right.
Okay,
Well, because remember, we have a lot of sewer and road projects in there, so
Uh-huh.
it tend to be a long period of time. So when we amortize that, so it's like a few bucks a year for
Okay.
the auditorium seating,
In the
but
long
we
run.
pay that off early.
okay.
Okay,
I think that
all right, so we can work on that.
we have
Greg,
options then with,
to try to limit our exposure there.
okay.
We'll have to meet again with emergency management. Okay. Anyone else?
Just to make this clear, we can keep this, emergency management as is, but have options to not get both.
But it's, yeah,
vehicles.
there
We
still
can-
are, it still needs to, for the actual purchase.
ordinance.
It'll still
Mhm.
come to council.
Okay, sounds like it's,
And that gives
There's a lot
that
of
gives
options. yes,
to rework that.
okay,
Or like you said, stagger, so then everything doesn't age out at the same time.
yeah.
Or if you end up with 11 years, you don't end up with 2 months.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to open the public session. This meeting is now open to the public for anyone to speak on any subject. Please state your name and address for the record and observe a 5-minute limit per speaker.
Hello. Can you hear me?
That was quick. There's someone in Zoom wishing to speak?
Apparently.
Yes. It's Tom Corona.
Okay. 1 second for me.
I thought it was me. It did sound like me to me.
Okay, let me just do this just so. Okay, we just need you to state your name and address for the record.
Tom Corona, 2602 Leeds Avenue, Northfield.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to just discuss two things real quick. First off, I sat and listened to the assistant fire chief's pitch on the fire truck, and I can tell you this, that equipment needs to be replaced. We addressed that, God, back when I was on council, when they remounted the ladder truck in 99 and it had bad rails and they had to fix that. But let me explain something about the ISO codes. Okay, and the chief mentioned something about your homeowner's insurance going down, and I don't want you to mistake this because your constituents might want to hear this. Your ISO code is the Insurance Services Office. All right, they issue what's called an ISO code to each municipality. It's a fire code. It ranges from 1 to 10, and it usually goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Okay, and the ISO code is basically made up of 5 criteria. 50% of that comes from your local fire department, including staffing levels, training, and proximity to a firehouse. That's 50% of that rating. 40% of that rating comes from your available water supply, the availability of hydrants, flow, etc. 10% comes from emergency communications, such as your 911 system. 5.5% of that comes from outreach, including fire prevention, fire safety. 4.5% of that comes to your proximity to firehouses. Right now, Northfield, I believe, is a level 4 fire code. We were a 5. But don't let your constituents believe that you're going to go lower than a 4 by ordering this ladder truck, because that's not going to happen. Because the way the codes are made up is whether you're a 4 or a 5, it's not going to change your homeowner's rate. Now, if you drop below and you go to a 1, 2, or even a 3, maybe, all right, but that's not going to happen because we have a split fire department professional to volunteer. So just so you guys know, your rating is probably not going to get affected by that truck. So your homeowner's insurance is probably not going to change. It's probably why you didn't see a change in your homeowner's insurance. And not only that, a lot of companies, insurance companies now are not basing it on ISO codes anymore. They're doing metro-based rating on factors like historical fire data instead. So I just wanted to make that clear. I didn't want you guys to think, or let your constituents think, that you can lower your fire code by doing this. I don't really believe that's going to be the case. So I just wanted to bring that up and let everybody know how that worked.
Thank you.
Second of all, I would like to know if there's a thing on the table for the OEM office on getting 2 SUVs, 2 new SUVs for the OEM, and if you're going to go out and bond those SUVs.
Well, that is what we were just discussing. It is in our capital budget at this moment, but it would still have to come back for approval. And that's what we just spoke about, revisiting and limiting the expense there.
Okay, because I would just like to say on that subject, we need 2 tricked out SUVs in our OEM office. That should not be a priority for the city. All right. First of all, if you're going to trick out SUVs, give them to the police department and recycle their cars down to OEM. All right. We also don't need our OEM truck sitting in Galloway 8 hours a day at someone's work. All right. I was on OEM for years when I was chief of the rescue squad. All right. You better look back and look at your data and see how often the OEM office is actually activated in the city. All right. It's few and far between. So if that's a capital expenditure, I really believe that there are many more capital expenditures that you could put that towards, other than 2 tricked out trucks for OEM. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Well,
points.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? And no one has typed any questions.
Council President, did we discuss the type of vehicle? We talked about pickup trucks, four-wheel drive pickup trucks to put tow trailers and to put generators and equipment in the back. I don't think we ever talked about SUVs. I don't ever never talked about SUVs.
Yeah,
We've got time on that, right? This ordinance still have to come back.
I believe it was vehicles that would be able to.
Yeah, it's a pickup truck.
Yeah, I think it was pickup trucks that would be able to tow.
No, I just, the misinformation is being spewed around, that's the problem.
Well,
They're
that's
pickup
why we
trucks.
have these, that's why we have public meetings, so we can get rid of we can dispel rumors. Still no one, Zoom during that delay?
No, they can't hear you either, Greg.
No,
They
couldn't-
can't hear you either. I gave you 2 microphones.
There's no phone, so.
Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, the public session is now closed. The meeting notices, we have a council meeting, March 2nd at 6 PM. Work session will begin. Regular meeting will be immediately following. May I have a motion to
I
adjourn?
have one more question, please, for
No.
Dawn.
Hold-
Sorry,
Pause,
got away from me.
Councilwoman Mad.
Our tax rate is going to be what?
1.5 cent increase
Thank you.
is $15.
Okay. Yeah, compared to like was 2.9 and we took it down to 1.5. And that's with the support staff, right?
That is with the support staff, which we probably, do you want me to take that out?
Which support staff is that?
We
For the
had-
police, that would,
Last meeting, we had decided to.
like a
make
secretarial staff
the
or?
part-time position
And
in
what
the
did you
police
put into
department.
that?
I put in a benefits package and another half a year salary to make the second position in the police department a full-time position. They now
So-
have 1 full-time and 1 part-time secretary.
Oh, yeah, take that, yeah, go
You
back
take
to,
it out?
Well, the need for this IT person concerns me.
That's-
I think
yeah.
that should probably be a priority, and I don't know that you want to take that out, because I see that as a real weakness in our police department, to not have someone, I mean, if, God forbid, something happens to a lieutenant,
oh, he's up there.
nobody there that knows how to fix this stuff.
We,
And,
Well, there's
we
outside,
need to
you can
study
hire
that, though.
outside.
Well, that's what
we
I think,
just,
we should shop for that outside contractor and
You
and
just
figure out what that's
approved-
gonna cost.
you just approved the contract.
Pardon?
We just approved the new contract for the IT vendor. We're getting away from all
And that
covered.
includes the police department?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're moving to
Okay.
Ocean Computer. We're having our first implementation meeting on Monday. So we should find out everything that's going on then. And they will take care of the MDTs and all that.
Oh, good.
And like to Paul's point and Eric's point, how quickly they respond to us. And we do have emergency services in the contract. And they say they're gonna be able to take care of it all.
Uh-huh.
So hopefully it'll work out. As far as the radios and those other things, that's a different issue. They don't handle those.
I see, but that would free up some of lieutenant's time.
Right.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he's spending considerable time on IT.
Yeah. But I think
He
that's
has the
something the police
expertise.
department needs to look into, like say for next year's budget, maybe expanding that. But as far as support staff, if you want to add another half or not, that's up to you guys.
And I would ask the mayor that the police department do some sort of time-specific job
They
study
should.
to
Yeah, they
figure
need
out
to do time studies.
where the needs really are. I mean, you get sort of a squishy concept of needs, but it'd be nice to know if they're looking for a
And
new
you close
person,
it.
what
Nope.
skill sets they should be shopping for.
Since we're,
Mhm.
okay.
Well, as I said, that's only one aspect of the problem here we're concerned. I wanted to get more police on, the presence and so forth like that, and then address also the potential for the experience. So it wasn't just, it's a multi, obviously, and you can't answer all of them.
Are you keeping the other half of support staff or?
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
I just wanted to know if Dawn is keeping the 1.5 or changing it. What's the final
Take that out,
number?
does it bring it to what, 1.25?
A little bit over 1.
1.
And where, I'm sorry to keep going with this,
Support
but
staff, we had-
where, I get that. Where are we as far as surplus, use of surplus?
we're at 51%
Oh, that's really good.
of our available surplus.
So what would it take us to get to zero?
Too much surplus.
Well, it's, it's the numbers.
Well, it depends. Are we taking out the support staff or we're leaving that in?
No,
for-
take that out,
Take
yeah.
that
That out, so we'd have to use another 125,000, so it would leave us, we'd be using 56% of available surplus, which puts it at 8% of operating,
You can't build this up without.
which is at
Y-
5 to 10% of our operating budget.
But that's leaving it at about,
At
a
flat.
half?
No,
That's
it's zero.
leaving it at
That's
zero
zero.
tax increase, yeah.
And we're still staying at.
At some point, this is, at some point, it's gonna be a shell game. It's either now or later.
No, of course, but this has been.
Yeah.
a tough budget.
And- but it might be-
8%, We're going out for bonding, but 8% is still a respectable surplus.
But it also,
Coup-
I'm sorry.
No, go
Counselor.
ahead.
I was just going to say, it
So
also
it would
doesn't,
either be some now and some later, or a lot later. So
Well, not
it's just,
necessarily. We don't know that.
If you bring it down to a flat, first of all, we all agree.
I get it, I get it.
Secondly, I suspect this is going to be a better revenue year than what we just experienced. We're now 421,000 this year. And we're using the surplus and we had a tax increase before to make that up. But next year, if the sport savings come through, crossing guard thing gets eliminated.
Yeah.
Well, that's on this.
That's already in here.
That's already in
baked
here.
Oh,
That's built
I thought
in.
we were doing it for
Right.
like half a year. Some of
No,
it
the
may-
cro-
may have
No,
happened
that's,
before.
the crossing guards are
in.
built in with the half a year.
but the
already.
court isn't yet, right?
The court is
So-
not.
The court isn't, but
Because
you
it
got a
hasn't been
point with the court.
finalized.
That's a
Because we
good,
don't know yet. Yeah, they're both, that's all open.
yeah.
So that could reduce us.
Frank, you've been here the longest, so what
More
do you,
surplus than I have. And then a lot of taxpayers.
Well, you can see in the,
Didn't
you can
have.
see the list of surplus in
Well, we-
the back page.
Yeah, well, we started the year with $125,000 more in surplus. And with what you just did, we're using $321,000 more.
Mhm.
And we're starting, we'd be starting next year $200,000 shorter than we were this year. But still with.
But still 8%.
1,068,000 in surplus.
Right? Some thoughts?
Right?
So I hope you make it up for the year, for next year, or you gotta raise it in taxation.
right.
Well,
Basically, what-
factors, the amount that raised, that our tax collection was favorable, that reduced the amount of uncollected taxes. Like you said, there's a lot of variables.
Mhm.
Hopefully you make money on the money you have, and Dawn's done a good job at that, but, there's only so much you can do, and, our net growth, net worth increases with the development and some of the fees from that development, it's possible that it would be a wash, because it's not a given.
Mhm.
But that fees would be, even if we did recruit it next year, we couldn't apply it, right? I mean, till another year. Right.
Well, if we receive it this year, we can use it next year.
If yeah. Okay.
Well, the development is moving. I'm talking about the Crescent Hill development, and the sewer connection fees are being applied also, and that gets into the general fund also.
Is that, there's a residential fee and there's also a commercial fee, right?
That's a unit fee.
Okay.
Right,
It is-
per
it is
unit over here.
calculated-
Per unit,
Two different rates.
2 different rates for each.
Right. But it is
And we do
calculated.
charge residential as well as commercial for those connection fees.
Commercial is a little bit higher for your month, for your quarterly, your year, bi-yearly payment is a little higher than the residential. And commercial pays a percentage over a gallonage that's calculated by additional waters and a formula, which can be pretty heavy on a restaurant or something of that nature. And they do pay a lot more. But the sewer connection fees for Crescent Hill were negotiated downward in the lawsuit also, so we're not realizing 100% of that.
Mhm.
There is some new properties that were built, homes that were built.
But we don't know on the Crescent Hill, what phase if they're gonna be building the next building or anything like that. So
They're
that's,
moving right along. They got 6 buildings up now.
is it really that big? Okay, I haven't gone by.
Service them.
Well, to answer your question, we charge $2,600 for a connection fee.
Mhm.
And there's some concessions made to the Crescent Hill development because some of it is low income, right? So there was some concessions made on that. Last year, from the Crescent Hill, we got 59,000.
59,000.
Another thing to consider, we have not been collecting what's called a development from any of the new properties being built. And there's been 5 or 6 that have gone by just recently from the planning board. The money's got to be dedicated into affordable housing infrastructure.
That hasn't been collected, are you certain?
Not been being collected.
I know we had that question.
But Rami brought it up at the last meeting, and Mary checked into it, sure enough. It's supposed to be when they get a building permit, they pay a portion, and when they get their final approval, they're supposed to pay a portion. And it goes into a separate account towards affordable
Well,
housing.
it goes towards, yeah.
For instance, any of the improvements we might need to do for the Rosedale pump. And it is not been being collected.
When did that,
But that doesn't
when did
help
that
with-
start? How long have we not?
That
been
doesn't do anything
collecting?
for-
When the court
Yeah.
case was approved, apparently it was pending for some time.
So are we in the process of implementing that, I guess?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yes. we are. And actually, it starts with the construction official, and he notifies the tax assessor, and then the tax assessor completes the form, and then it has to be collected by the applicant. We have a dedicated bank account set up for that, and all our reporting ready to go with the affordable housing folks.
Based on the improvements to the lot.
But that only goes toward affordable housing.
Correct.
Yeah,
Expanded, it only goes sort of, it's based on that, but it only goes toward affordable housing spending. It doesn't do,
That's correct, but something like the Rosedale.
Something like
pump
that.
would be considered as part of.
yeah,
as
that,
part of
yes,
it,
true,
because infrastructure counts.
exactly.
And you can also subsidize the housing or there's other things you can do with the money, but you don't have to. Infrastructure, you can use it for infrastructure. So there might be some savings coming down the road for that, because there's building going on.
If there's favorable, if the property values keep going the way they are, the tax appeals should start to slow down, and hopefully that would be a good impact also, that would keep our net worth the same, or if not better.
Yeah, well, it is getting better. Remember, we averaged 12 or $13 million in assessed valuation loss. This year it was only 2.6 million. So
So that's the.
that's,
So shall we go for 0? Shall we go for 0?
I think that takes a lot out of our surplus.
You hate to see an increase, but these are hard costs, I've said before, you can only come in flat so many times, you've got fractional obligations and other issues that keep increasing. And politically, it looks good, but financially, business sense, it's not. Hard
Well,
costs are hard
You
costs.
can see the history of it from when we were at, a high level and it was, there was a lot. Yeah, we were at a high level. We were at an overly high level, of course,
At what
but
point did your bond rating start to get affected?
when it's below 5.
Oh.
They'd like to see it higher, and we're fighting a lot of negative factors this year with the state. Northfield can only control a small portion of our rating, right? Most of it's driven by the state of New Jersey and how our economy as a whole is here. So that's why we've always tried to show ourselves as very fiscally conservative and, keeping a strong fund balance, and that's always looked favorably by the rating agencies. But at 8%, it's not going to have a difference between 8 and 9%. Really isn't going to impact this side at all, I wouldn't think.
Just means next year we'll let the dig into it.
Next year, we'll have less to dig into. And historically, we've been keeping our surplus high when we've had these good years and these revenues, because we've been offsetting all that loss of valuation.
And then it also helps to maintain more of a level tax rather than spikes and valleys.
And the schools are going to do either. I mean, there's 7% increase last year, just going on the level.
Yeah.
I know they're coming.
Schools,
That's it. We can't.
I mean, it's over 57% of your tax bill is to schools.
Yes, and they've had increased costs.
Northfield is by far the highest.
So
So
just with that, without doing anything additional to the surplus, where are we now?
Well, I took the additional surplus out and we're at 0 tax increase. And that leaves you with the 1,168,000. I can go through and take the half position out, the administratively, if you wanted me to do that, and then put that little bit of surplus back in, probably about 50. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
And it would still be 0. I don't know what you want.
I thought, yeah, with at 50,
You want me to do?
It would,
At
it would add to the
52% of
surplus.
Can we kind of manipulate it this way in the sense that if we look with the court savings, the potential court savings, just kind of factor that in and say, can we get to 80,000 or 100,000? You know, and hope to realize that
but that just goes, that,
that's back in surplus.
yeah.
That's
Mhm.
back in
Okay,
surplus.
so
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
now we're anticipating paying 80,000, right?
Correct.
Yes.
To Hamilton. And if we,
It's only half a year.
that's half a year, and remember
It's not a
last year
full
we
year.
only collected $56,000.
It's only a half a year
And
of
it's only
savings
a half a
also.
year too.
Right, so next year you could potentially realize
Right.
that.
So with that surplus going down to 1,068,000, is that pushing it? Is that pushing us to a,
she just said, no. Yeah, she just said it's
yeah,
not
okay.
any different.
You don't want double digits. And you're just holding the taxpayers' money.
Well,
Yeah,
we're not talking about
that's not
double, we're
right.
talking, yeah. All right, the administrative person is out and the surplus at 52, and then let's move with that.
Okay, I'll make those adjustments.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we're at 0. The taxpayers. are-
I don't,
Thank you, everybody.
Now may I, a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sandwiches are in the office.
Thank you, everyone.
I wanna vote.
Anybody want sandwiches?